Hey, what's going on, people? Today I'm going to be doing a... Hey, what's going on, people? Today I'm going to be doing a video that is a little different than my usual videos. I will be talking about my 10 films that I want to see come out in 4K that aren't available yet. And that is something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to talk about. A lot of people liked my top 10 Atmos tracks that video that I made, and that kind of put me in the mindset to do this one whenever there was a lull. There's a little bit of a lull now, so I have the time to do so. And the first film that I would love to see in 4K would be Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This movie I absolutely love. It actually is my favorite Edgar Wright film. I know that's kind of controversial just because of the fact that other films of his get so much more attention, but I truly do love Scott Pilgrim. I was a huge gamer back in the day, and there are so many references in this film for me that I just adore, and I just feel like the video quality in specifically what HDR would bring to this movie. I mean, it's a very colorful movie. It's so bright and vibrant, and HDR would just kill with this film. And I feel like the Blu-ray is kind of soft at times, so I don't really feel like somebody would have to try that hard to make a 4K presentation that is better than that Blu-ray. And the audio would be killer in this also. Please put this out in 4K. And the next is Mandy. Now, this movie was pretty controversial, but besides that, I don't really want to get into my thoughts on the movie just yet. I might be reviewing it soon, maybe. But regardless, nobody can say that this isn't a gorgeous movie. I genuinely think that this movie is stunning visually, and with just the harsh colors and the harsh reds, I feel like, again, HDR would kill with this. A lot of my picks here are due to movies that I feel like HDR would play a huge factor in, just because HDR plays a huge factor in 4K and in the format of 4K. And the matter of fact, as far as the video presentations go, HDR plays the biggest factor in separating 4K from Blu-ray. So on top of that, hey, this would make a killer Atmos track if they actually took the time for it as well. This being ported over to 4K is unlikely. The studio here is owned by Lionsgate, but Lionsgate kind of lets them do their own thing, and they tend to be very anti-4K, and if they do release something in 4K, as in Color Out of Space, it's not going to have HDR. So, and the next, maybe my most obvious pick. I tried to do some picks that not everybody talks about, like being ported over to 4K, just because, hey, why watch this video if I'm just going to say what everybody else says, like Tron Legacy or, movies of that vein. But a lot of people say Fight Club should be ported over to 4K. It has kind of a crappy Blu-ray, and this movie deserves better. I love Fight Club. Love me some Fight Club. And I definitely feel like the 4K format, specifically HDR, can clean this movie up just a little bit. It's still meant to be gritty, and give it just a more punchy look than it has had in the past, and just make it stand out more visually. On top of that, I just think that Atmos would kill with this movie, and I would just so love it. Next up on the list might seem obvious, but not a lot of people say it: Speed Racer. Now, this movie, from my recollection, I haven't seen this movie since it came out in theaters. It was just okay. And I just specifically remember everything visually about the movie, and I think that it would just be amazing in 4K. The color palette, the reds, the yellows, the blues, just the pops of color that are in this movie, I just adore, even on a Blu-ray. So, hey, in 4K, this would absolutely be a knockout without even trying that hard at it, to be quite honest with you. And audio would be dynamite in Atmos with all of the racing. Just think about what Ford v Ferrari did for audio. And this movie would be like the anime version of that. God, it would kill in Atmos. Next on the list is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, specifically because I just don't want to lump all 3, maybe even 6 films in here under one tier. I feel like that's kind of cheating. But I will just put Fellowship of the Ring here. And that is mainly because that movie has the crappiest Blu-ray transfer of all of the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit films. It just looks flat. And for some reason, the way that they did the color palette in that Blu-ray made the backgrounds look really, really fake. And almost like they were actually on a set. But, I mean, they actually weren't on a set. And I feel like the Blu-ray kind of undermines how beautiful that movie should look. You have such lush greens that it could have, and a lot of the wizardry and the more CGI elements could really pop in this movie. And you know what? They don't on the Blu-ray. On top of that, of course I want this on Atmos. Are you kidding me? This is an obvious choice, and one that we might be getting later on this year. Might. There are just rumors at this point. Next up on the list is Pleasantville. And this was one that I actually grabbed from the Facebook community just because of the fact that somebody mentioned it, and I thought it was such a great choice, but one that I would never have thought of. A lot of black and white looks really good in 4K. And that isn't something that is that obvious within first glances of the format, but, I mean, Schindler's List, it looks amazing in 4K. So, with that being said, Pleasantville absolutely should look amazing in 4K, especially towards the end of the film where the pops of color come into play, and just the you know, I remember some of it. I haven't seen Pleasantville in such a long time. I remember there being like a tree on fire in front of a black and white house, and like that alone could be eye blinding if the transfer it's what it should be. And as far as Atmos audio goes, I don't really see how it would be a showstopper. This might be one of those that they don't bother doing an Atmos track for, but I would still like one. Next might be pretty obvious as well, and that is 300. Besides my gripes with Zack Snyder as a filmmaker, you can't say that he doesn't have the flair for visual style. And that is, hey, that is how he made his living. That's how he got to where he is in his career. And it all really, I mean, he did Dawn of the Dead before this, but it all stemmed from 300. And I just feel like this movie would look dynamite in 4K. Specifically, you know, the HDR here would look amazing. The reds would bleed off the screen and you would love it. And just, you know, the yellowish, almost orange hues that are in this movie, I feel like this would look gorgeous in 4K. And it would sound amazing in Dolby Atmos. This movie has always just crushed it as far as the audio goes, and if this was upgraded to Atmos, I would be there day one. Next up is the only one on the list that actually does have a German 4K, so that would mean that it would be an import because I'm in the US, but unfortunately that does not have HDR. And I would like this one re-released in a wider format for not just the US, but for everybody, and HDR to be prominent on the disc. I feel like this movie was shot gorgeously, and it just has such a killer look to it. Just the blues and the moody vibe that the cinematography brings here would just look dynamite in 4K. And I definitely do feel like an Atmos track would add a little bit more to the atmosphere of the film. The next up is Big Trouble in Little China. And I picked this just because I actually just got in the Steelbook version of the newest Shout Factory release that they did for this movie, and I feel like it is just a kick-ass movie. I love the film, but it doesn't have a 4K release, even a 4K transfer that was ported over to a Blu-ray, so it would be downscaled. But almost all of the older John Carpenter movies still do. This one actually does not. Even The Thing does. But this does not. In fact, on Blu-ray, this, despite having quite a few Blu-ray releases, we still have the same video transfer from 2008, actually. And it's just been ported over and given more special features. This is one of the most colorful John Carpenter films out there. I feel like it would be one that benefits the most from a 4K transfer. And you know what? If Escape from New York and Prince of Darkness, They Live in the Fog are all on 4K. You know, in the States you would have to import it, but it's worth it. Those are killer box sets that are from Studio Canal. And why isn't this in 4K with the color palette that it has? I will never know. And hey, while you're at it, Studio Canal, please upgrade the audio, put a Dolby Atmos mix, and it would be the best box set that you've done for any John Carpenter film out there today. And lastly, I wanted to pick one that was really kind of like out in left field, just because I just want this video to be different than everybody else's. So I am actually going to put Tombstone in the last slot. I feel like the Blu-ray for this is crapola. And, it's just soft, murky. So, with that being said, I actually feel like a 4K transfer would help out this movie tremendously, especially with black levels and not making them feel so inky that they just kind of bleed onto everything on the screen. And along with that, just give the color palette something that is a little bit more tasteful, that I believe that this movie has the potential to be. And along with that, I do feel like an audio track, Dolby Atmos audio track, would be great here as well. And that is it for my 10 films that I want to see in 4K. So coming up next on the channel, as soon as 1917 comes out, in physical media. I will be getting that in 4K, and I'll be reviewing that for you guys. And after that, I have a huge mega surprise for you. If you guys are up on what is actually coming out, then you will know what I'm talking about. But if not, then I'm going to keep it a secret just because I want to surprise you guys. And as always, thank you for watching my videos. You guys are awesome. I don't need to say it because you know it. And I will see all of you next time.